Better get under cover, Sylvester. There's a storm blowing up, a whopper. To speak in the vernacular of the peasantry. Poor little kid, I hope she gets home all right.
Ladies, gentlemen, and druids of all ages, one of my favorite seasonal powers from the first season of this game has been re-added in permanently as a unique ring. Yes, it was changed a little bit as a power, but the fact that this exists means that Druid now finally has a proper method of pulling and grouping up enemies, which every other class already had. The downside of this is that it happens once when you use your ultimate and once 5 seconds later, so you get it twice per ultimate usage, but we can make up for that with ultimate cooldown resetting, and the ring itself comes with ultimate cooldown reduction as an affix, which helps out quite a bit. On top of that, each time it pulls, this ring does damage, and so if you get one that is a particularly high item power and a high roll on the effect too, it can actually do nearly 5k damage as a base, not to mention that the damage of this also scales up 1% for every 1 willpower you have, so you can multiply it ridiculously, and like everything else in the game, it scales with all of your various damage bonuses and multipliers too, so you can make that damage actually incredibly meaty if you want to do so. But today I thought I'd just go over what I think the best high-tier druid build is in Season 2 that easily takes big advantage from the existence of this ring just being slotted in, which also combos is the first time that I've talked about Tornado Wolf this season, so let's just dive right in, talk about the skill point choices and why I've made them, the spirit boons that we're going to use for this build, the legendaries and uniques that make it function correctly, some general gearing tips for your affixes, then we'll talk about the Season 2 specific vampiric powers, and then also our Paragon board setup, followed by just some tips on how to play the build for anyone who is unfamiliar with Tornado Druid trying it out for the first time. Starting off with the skill points, for our basic skill we are going to go with Wind Shear. In previous seasons this tended to lean towards Storm Strike for the vulnerable application, but this season we have a number of solutions to vulnerable application, which makes Wind Shear better both for being ranged and also for giving us the increased movement speed part, which you'll see later on also increases our attack speed, which is very important. Then we're going to move on to our core skills area, and here we are of course going to be taking maximum ranks of Tornado, and any extra ranks that you can get from gear on all this are just also excellent. We also take Enhanced Tornado for a 20% chance to spawn a bonus tornado when using the skill, and then we also take Raging Tornado, which gives us vulnerable application chance from tornadoes. There's generally no point in using Primal Tornado at this point, which was actually just apply a slow when tornado hits enemies, as we just use a different method to apply slows anyways, so the extra vulnerable chance from Raging Tornado is just nice to have, even though it isn't our main source of vulnerable application by any means. Then we grab some passives here, 1 rank of Heart of the Wild for 3 bonus maximum resource, mostly just as a gateway to 3 ranks of Wild Impulses, which increases your spirit cost on core skills by 9%, but also increases their damage by 15%, which works out to be a massive positive trade-off, honestly. Then we're going to be taking 3 ranks of Predatory Instinct as a passive for 6% bonus critical chance on close enemies, and 3 ranks of Digitigrade Gate for a bonus 9% move speed when in werewolf form, which we will be permanently when in combat. After that we're going to move over to our defensive node cluster over here, and there first we're going to be grabbing Cyclone Armor, as well as its enhancement, and then also preserving Cyclone Armor too. This as a whole gives you a constant passive 10% damage reduction to non-physical effects. You can use the active ability of this to knock back nearby enemies and also slow them, and then every 10 seconds you get a little passive protection for a couple of seconds when taking damage. This is just a nice utility skill that fits the builds quite easily. Then we're also going to be grabbing Blood Howl here, which heals you for 20% life as a base, Enhanced Blood Howl, which reduces the cooldown of this skill by 1 second every time you get a kill, and then also Preserving Blood Howl, which gives you 15% bonus attack speed for 4 seconds after using the skill, which we can keep active pretty much constantly in mob clearing thanks to the cooldown reduction part. Then we grab the passives here, which are 3 ranks of Ancestral Fortitude for 15% bonus to all elemental resistances, then also 3 ranks of Vigilance for 15% damage reduction that lasts 6 seconds after you use a defensive skill, which again should be pretty much permanently active in group clearing content thanks to Blood Howl. After that we're going to the companion node cluster for just a moment to pick up 3 ranks of Nature's Reach. This gives you increased 9% damage against distant enemies, tripled that bonus if affecting slowed enemies. Basically the reason for this is while most of our intentional combat will be close range, you'll be moving around. Your tornadoes will be going away from you if they track distant enemies, and if you throw out a tornado and then walk away from it, it will suddenly start to count as distant damage. This will also slow the enemy because of one of our passives that we'll take afterwards, and then it gets 27% bonus damage when this happens because of this passive. Basically, we had 3 bonus skill points left at the end, and while this isn't active for all of our damage, when it is active, it is a very notable increase. Then we move on to to enter the Wrath cluster, and here we're going to be grabbing Hurricane for a radius of damage around us when it is active, as well as Enhanced Hurricane, which slows enemies that are within this radius, and then also Savage Hurricane, which reduces the damage of any enemy within the radius by 20%, a really solid defensive addition. Then just a few passives here, 1 rank of Neurotoxin, which slows any enemy that is poisoned, and then this is also a gateway to let us get 1 rank of Toxic Claws, which makes any crits with werewolf skills apply part of their base damage as poison, then 3 ranks of Envenom for 30% multiplicative bonus critical damage to poisoned enemies, and I also have 3 bonus ranks of this myself from my amulet, which is an ideal passive to have bonus ranks of if you get the choice. After that we have our ultimate skill cluster, and no real surprise, we are taking Grizzly Rage here, as well as its enhancements, and as a whole, this is a nice long-lasting transformation, normally into a dire bear, but thanks to one of our aspects it instead turns us into a dire werewolf, which increases movement speed, reduces resource spending, increases your damage, heals you on kill, and also increases its own duration on kill too. It makes you unstoppable for a few seconds after activation, and it also fortifies you for 8% of your max life every second while it's active. Basically, this is your big damage window cooldown. Hit it, spam tornadoes, and you'll have a great time with it. Then we just pick up some passives. We're going to be grabbing 3 ranks here of Defiance for 12% increased damage with nature magic skills against elites, 2 ranks of Circle of Life for 2% maximum life is healing whenever you use a nature magic skill that costs spirits, then 3 ranks of Resonance for 6% increased damage with nature magic skills. We don't activate the second bonus here, so this is just for that damage bump. Then we're going to be taking 3 ranks of Defensive Posture over here, just for 15% increased fortified generation, just in general. Finally, we get to choose our key passive for the build, which is going to be Perfect Storm, giving you 1 spirit when you cast a storm skill, as well as giving you all storm skills 15% increased damage against vulnerable, immobilized, and slowed enemies. This just fits very well with the build, and I've always been a fan of this in a Tornado Druid build personally. With all that covered then, let's talk about our spirit boons. In the Deer Path, you want Wariness for 10% damage reduction against elites. In the Eagle Path, you want Scythe Talons for an extra 5% crit chance, and then you want to bond with the Wolf Spirit here and take Bolster, which gives you 15% of your life as Fortify every time that you use a defensive skill. Then you also want to take Calamity over here for 25% longer ultimate duration. Then in the Snake Path, we're going to grab Calm Before the Storm to give nature magic skills a 10% lucky hit chance to lower your ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds, which is part of what allows us to keep this pretty much just permanently active as an ultimate if we move fast enough through a dungeon. After that then, let's talk Legendaries and Uniques. First and foremost, in order to even use this, you need to have Tempest Roar, of course. Without this, the build simply does not function, the synergies don't work. This unique makes your storm skills count as wolf skills, as well as giving you a lucky hit chance with storm skills to restore some spirits, both of which are a very big deal for us. Then we of course have the main star of the day, which is Airidah's Inexorable Will. This is really quite beautiful within this build too. When you press Grizzly Rage, all enemies will just be pulled right on top of you. Then you can start spamming tornadoes out, knowing that they are hitting every enemy in the area. Hell, if you are in content that you are confident in your ability to do, the best play to do is just do that, but then quickly move to the next pack after throwing out a few tornadoes, walking away not only to activate your distant damage bonus on the first tornadoes that you already threw out, but also so you can get another solid pull-in on the 5-second mark, lay down a ton more tornadoes on this new group of enemies, and murder everything again. If you can get your lucky hit procs and your enemies don't die too fast, this can lead to permanent Grizzly Rage uptime, and getting to do that lets you have a pull cycle pretty much every 25 seconds where you get 2 pulls 5 seconds apart, which is actually pretty damn solid. Past that, we have one more unique, which is the Tybalt's Will Pants. These aren't required by any means, but they're just a very notable bonus of up to 40% multiplicative damage that you can keep up pretty much just permanently because its requirement is to either be or have been unstoppable in the last 4 seconds, which we can absolutely achieve. Mine is a lower roll, but a high roll of this is exceedingly strong. Then we move on to our legendaries, and first up we have our amulet, of course, for 1.5 times potency, and here we have the aspect of the Dire Wolf, which turns Grizzly Rage into a wolf skill, and the main reason it is in this slot is to boost the spirit cost reduction part of it, so that we can really just spam the hell out of our tornadoes, as that is always the main goal of this build. After that, we also have the aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast. This increases the duration of Grizzly Rage, and also makes it so anytime that you get a crit during Grizzly Rage, it will give you a stacking bonus crit damage multiplier of 10%, which stacks up to a maximum of 200% bonus crit damage. Unfortunately, this got its cap this season. It used to be infinite, which was what made Tornado so good before, was the way that it synergized with this, but now that it has the cap, which is probably good, because if we had the attacks we would do right now without the cap, Tornado would be ball lightning levels of silly, if not even further. After that is the Storm Chaser aspect. This makes your tornadoes actively track enemies rather than just moving completely at random, so it is quite important to have this. The actual number roll isn't really a big deal though, it's just having the aspect in the first place. Then you also want the aspect of Retaliation for up to 40% bonus damage with core skills depending on how much of your life is fortified. Then our last offensive aspect is the Accelerating aspect over here for up to 25% 5% bonus attack speed for 5 seconds after getting a crit with a core skill. Then on our boots, we have the Ghostwalker aspect here. We are constantly making ourselves unstoppable in this build, so this just translates to letting you face your enemies at will, and a nice movement speed bump just sort of constantly. Movement speed in this build also turns into attack speed, so this is technically a damage increase in itself. Then for our final aspect, we have Disobedience on the chest, just to give us a little bit more defenses, specifically armor generation, for a fair bit more physical protection, as we already cover our resistances elsewhere. As far as the actual affixes on the equipment itself then, for offense, crit chance and crit damage are absolutely ideal, as is vulnerable damage, cooldown reduction is great, spirit cost reduction is incredible, and of course attack speed is a really big deal too. Defensively, you want to make sure that you get your resistances sorted so that you have right around 70% resistance to each element, then otherwise you just want to get a bunch of just bonus maximum life, bonus percent armor, damage reduction from close or well fortified, all of those classics. Moving on then to the Vampiric Powers in the build, here at the top we have Ravenous. This gives you a high lucky hit chance to activate bonus attack speed equal to 40% of your total movement speed. In full combat with your ultimate on and everything and good aspect rolls as well, you can hit maximum movement speed for a character of 200%, which makes this 80% bonus attack speed when activated, and that is an absolutely silly amount of attack speed. Combine that with the Undying power over here, which heals you for 3% every time you cast a skill of any kind, and suddenly you are healing a ridiculous amount extremely quickly too. Then we have Anticipation for a 20% cooldown reduction on Grizzly Rage. Sadly, the damage part doesn't really affect Grizzly Rage. And then we have another nice combo over here, which is Prey on the Weak for 16% bonus damage against vulnerable enemies, as well as making any enemy affected by Vampiric Curse also count as vulnerable. Then Metamorphosis, which turns your Evade into a bat transforming dash that applies Vampiric Curse to any enemy that you pass through, and also makes you unstoppable for 4 seconds afterwards. This feeds into Tybalt's Will, and also into the Ghostwalker boost, which feeds into Ravenous, and you can just see the beautiful feedback loop of synergies and bonuses coming together perfectly here. With that then, let's talk about our Paragon board setup. From the starting board, you want to head up the right path here through the damage increase rare node, and then wrap around to the left here to get to the glyph socket in the middle. And here you want to stick in the exploit glyph for bonus damage against vulnerable enemies. Fill in all the dexterity in the radius as well, and also grab the rare nodes too before heading up the left side to reach the exit and attach on the ancestral guidance board with the legendary node in the bottom left side. From here you want to go pretty much directly to that legendary node itself, which when you get there will give you 30% multiplicative bonus damage for 5 seconds after you spend 75 spirits. This will just be active constantly in combat because we're constantly spending that amount of spirit every 5 seconds. After that you want to go back over and head straight up before curving to reach the glyph socket of the board itself, inside of which you want to put the werewolf glyph. This gives you bonus damage when in werewolf form, and also gives you bonus damage reduction while in werewolf form too. So you want to grab the surrounding rare nodes and the magic ones, as well as the relevant ones to actually activate the effect. Then you want to head out the exit on the right side of this board to attach the Lust for Carnage board with the legendary power on the top side. Here we want to go directly into the board and up to get to the attack speed increasing rare and magic nodes, as these are just really strong. Attack speed is one of our most important stats, so we want to have as much of it as possible. After that you go to the right and then up to get to the legendary node itself, which gives you 2 spirit as a refund every time you get a critical strike with a werewolf skill. Then you want to go down to reach the glyph socket itself here, in which we're going to put the Undaunted glyph for extra damage while fortified, as well as the extra damage reduction when fortified too, which is just nice to have. Then you want to pick up most of the surrounding intelligence here, and then also the rare and magic nodes of note, and then you want to head down to the lower exit of the board itself and stick on the Constricting Tendrils board with the glyph socket on the top right side. From here you want to head pretty much directly to that glyph socket, and here you want to put in the Territorial glyph, which gives you bonus damage against close targets as well as bonus damage reduction from close enemies, so you want to get as much dexterity as you can in here, just absolutely fill it out, as well as getting the relevant magic and rare nodes. After this we're going to head back to the Ancestral Guidance board, and we want to head out the top of it to get to the Thunderstruck board here, which we're going to put the legendary node in the top left side with the glyph socket in the bottom right. Head directly to that glyph socket through the rare node at the bottom here, and then you want to stick in the Earthen Sky glyph. This increases the potency of all the magic nodes within the radius, and it also gives you bonus damage with nature magic skills against crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies, which we will have enemies be pretty much just constantly. It's very, very good. After that you want to head over to the left and climb up through this middle section of the board and its rare and magic nodes to eventually get to the legendary node of the board itself, which makes your storm skills deal extra damage equal to 20% of your damage versus close and your damage versus distant enemy bonuses. This means no matter what, you are getting at least some value from having both the Nature's Reach passive and the Territorial glyph active at the same time, no matter what range you're actually fighting at. After that you just want to head up to the left a little bit more to grab this little cluster of crit and vulnerable damage increased nodes. Finally we want to head to the right side exit of this board to attach on the Heightened Malice board with the legendary node in the top left. Then you want to simply head to that legendary node as fast as you can, getting that one little rare node along the way, because why not really, and your final point should be perfectly putting you on this node itself, which makes it so that while there are 3 or more poisoned enemies near you, you deal 45% increased damage as a multiplier, which is obviously very much a strong buff, even though it's not active in single target situations. And that does it for your Paragon board setup then. Every single point spent, so let's round this all off with simply how to play the build. If you know that you're going through a densely packed area, you can use Grisly Rage freely. You get so much cooldown reduction in this build that it can stay up infinitely as long as you have enough enemies to hit and proc your lucky hits off of. Cyclone Armor's active is only for emergencies, otherwise it only really hurts you by moving enemies around and separating them, so don't press this more than you need to. Blood Howl you want to use whenever it is up. Hurricane is precisely the same, and then from there, you just want to spam tornadoes like all hell as much as you physically can. If you're running out of spirit, use a couple of wind shears, but for the most part, this is extremely self-sustaining as you can mostly spam tornado without running out of spirit as long as your Grisly Rage cycle is solid. You do want to throw out a wind shear once every few seconds though, just to get the movement speed, especially if you can get it to go through multiple enemies, because the movement speed becomes attack speed, which means more tornadoes. And that just about does it for today then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this full breakdown of the malignant version of the Tornado Wolf build for Season 2, and honestly, I think this is the current best use of the utility effect on our new Malignant Ring 2, if you just want to mess around with it. This build is exceedingly strong, especially once you get your stats worked out, so it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't done so yet. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.